Hey, there we go.
Jordan,
How
how
are
you?
you? Good. How are you doing?
Good, good, good.
Awesome.
Long time coming.
I know. I think I was harassing you for a few months there, and we finally got something lined up.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Awesome.
delighted. Where are you?
I'm up in Minnesota, so it's 2 p.m. our time here.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yep.
Love Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing this and taking the time out on your Sunday. Like I said, I know I was kind of harassing you for a while, so I appreciate you doing it. I know a lot of people are in here excited to kind of hear this side of it, and so I'll just kind of do a quick introduction. I'm assuming a lot of people I've been kind of posting your stuff a lot. So I'm assuming a lot of people are in here from my page, kind of have a good idea of who you are and the work you do. But for anyone who doesn't, Andrew's a professor at Stanford. And I kind of the first time I saw, I think it was the Rich Roll podcast and the Rogan podcast. And that was an automatic watch for me. But recently you started coming out with your own podcast. So I've been following a lot of those too. But again, I'm gonna try and keep this around 45 minutes so I don't take up everyone's Sunday here. But I got a list of questions here. I'd love to kind of fire at you, but thanks again for being on, and I'm
Sure.
looking forward to this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, you got the backdrop right. I run the lab and I do as much public education as I can make time for, and those two things keep me busy but fulfilled. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I know you've built a really strong community around themes of personal development and education and learning and applying those learnings. So that's definitely up my alley.
Yeah, try to. And you recently just started kind of going. I mean, maybe not recently, but you kind of really stepped into the online community as of past few years, haven't you? As far as kind of getting on podcasts and everything like that.
Yeah, so the in 2015, I made a decision to start putting my neck out there and doing some education in neuroscience. And what I did actually, if people are interested in taking on anything new career-wise, I'm a big fan of doing what's called a listening tour. You kind of you get involved in things, you dip your head into things, and you do it to with the intention of kind of trying to figure out where there's a need, and what people are looking for, and where you might be able to serve best given your unique attributes. And 2015, 2016, 2017, I did a lot of that. And then it was really end of 2019, a friend of mine asked what I was going to do for the new year in terms of public service. And I said I'd just start teaching on Instagram. So I started doing these little posts, and I was trying to learn Spanish at the time. So I was trying to neuroplasticity as possible. But actually, I'm still learning Spanish and sign language, but slowly. So what I've decided to do is I incorporated drawing. I'm trying to get better at drawing, and so I do some of my skills are drawing various aspects of anatomy. Anyway, I say all this just to say that I took the last year I did a lot of podcasts and now host my own podcast. But I spent 3 or 4 or more years building up like what I wanted to talk about, how I wanted to communicate it. Good example would be early on, people had a lot of questions about breathing and breath work. And pretty soon I started figuring out like, like I'm going to become the breathwork guy. I don't want that.
Yeah.
And look, I want to say, I think there's great value in breathwork. My lab works on it. But you have to figure out what's most important and to you in terms of what you want to bring forward. And for me, science and neuroscience is what it's about. So that's why the podcast allows me to touch on all aspects of neuroscience: creativity, sleep. We have one coming out tomorrow. The next episode is about food and mood, like the relationship between gut microbiome and different nutrients and brain states. And so it's fun. I get to learn, I get to teach. But for anyone that's interested in building a career path, it takes a good 2-3 years to get your rhythm. And
Yeah.
I'm the slowest, as you know from trying to schedule with me. I'm the slowest being on the planet. I'm glacially slow. But what I build and what I've been fortunate enough to build in my life, generally, it's laid down like one thin layer of paint on top of the next, on top of the next. I'm
Yeah.
like onto an email from like 6 months ago, like, hey, finally getting your email. But I've learned it's like my bulldog Costello, slow, steady, and sturdy, and
Yep.
that's, well, he's my inspiration, and when you up fast, down fast, and so the Rogan thing was a wonderful opportunity. Lex Fridman, Rich Roll, many others having me on was a huge opportunity. But by then I had already been speaking and teaching for 20 years about neuroscience. So for any of the guys in your group or gals that are tuning in, you know, if you have something you want to share with the world, write, try it out on people, do it. I mean, I probably put 10, 15 hours of research into each podcast, and you got to learn to love that process. There's no
Yeah.
quick up, quick down, you know?
Right. And that's actually, this is perfect because this was actually one of the first things I kind of wanted to ask you, and you talk about it a lot too. And I know kind of in the entrepreneurial community, a lot of people say, you know, you got to love the process and enjoy the process and kind of take your focus off, you know, the end goal or the end, whatever it is, or I want to make this much. And I heard you talk about this a lot actually in terms of the dopamine too, but I've tried it on myself where I've tried to start rewarding the effort process. And this is what I love because I think it's true, but I would love to kind of hear you more talk about that. But in terms of like falling in love with the process, is that essentially what rewarding the effort is? Are you releasing dopamine and essentially attaching yourself to the process? Is that what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, this thing, most of what I teach and I go out there with is like objective. It's like breathe twice in, then exhale long. You know, it's get light at this time. You know, there's those really concrete things. And then when you start getting into dopamine and the neuromodulators, it starts getting a little bit subjective. But that's also where there's great power. So, for instance, what you think is funny or a song that you listen to and it gets you really hyped is not going to be the same thing necessarily as what I think is funny and gets me hyped up.
Right.
And there's some overlap there, but maybe not. And that's because dopamine, which is released in all those cases, is very subjective. But you can leverage that. So to be really clear, the dopamine self-reward process, aka growth mindset, leaning into the process, learning to love the process, is not about saying, okay, I'm on the right path, I'm almost to my goal. It's about setting really close horizons. You know, like the phrase I like is, you know, you want to move the horizon of something that you know is attainable. So let's say you have it in your mind to write a book or to build a website. You sit down and you feel that agitation and you're like, okay, what's the goal today? You know, I'm going to finish like 800 words or something. As you start typing, you want to literally subjectively say, okay, like I'm in motion. I'm actually like typing. And it's not huge, like crossing the finish line type of dopamine thing. It's learning to recognize when you're headed in the right path and the fact that you're controlling your own actions. And those dopamine circuits have a positive feedback loop. And, you know, dopamine allows you to go further, longer with more intensity and not perceive it as terrible. You know, some other phrases that come to mind, I'm not really big on phraseology because it's always, a long time ago, I experienced that, you know, some people say absence makes the heart grow fonder, and then someone else will out of sight, out of mind. So which one?
Exactly.
Like science doesn't work like that. Science doesn't follow memes and Instagram posts. Science is about mechanism. But there is some sayings that work. So move that horizon in as close as you can do something attainable, and then move it out.
Kind of like chopping it up.
It's chunking, but it's chunking with a self-reward component. When you just think about the phrase like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, or you think just about chunking, what's missing from that is or like how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Well, what's missing is that the self-reward process allows the entire thing to be more manageable and in some cases really pleasurable. So what I would suggest is, you know, you have to build up the circuits and the ability to do the self-reward process. Look, some days are excruciating for me, just excruciating, trying to get through the most basic of things. I struggle like everybody else. And a sense of humor really helps, like a levity. That's a great way to access it. Just laughing at yourself at how ridiculous we can all be as human beings, trying to like conquer our mind and just do the things we already know how to do. I know how to put a pen to paper or to type, and yet it can be really challenging. So the self-reward process is really key. And then the other thing, like dopamine is this molecule that allows us to go further with more intensity and feel good about it. But the phrase that I like a lot is, you know, aim small, miss small. So like if you say you got 800 words to write, try and churn out one sentence on the page. And then when you hit that, then think about the next sentence. Like, so chunking is so micro small can be really useful. And, you know, good days, bad days, it happens. And you know, there's a lot to the process of making progress. But what ends up happening is pretty soon it becomes reflexive. I should just say, I wake up every morning, every single morning, feeling like my first thoughts aren't gratitude. My first thoughts are, oh my God, the number of things I have to do that I haven't done, you know. So then I start every day. I genuinely start every day with this yoga nidra type protocol, these deep rest protocols. And then I try and just be grateful that I'm waking up, face up, mobile,
Yeah.
breathe, ambulatory, you know, and just because I've had days that were rough, and you do have to, those can amplify things. But, you know, there's days I'm bouncing up and into my meetings and forget all that. You know,
Right.
we're all human, but I think it's important to learn to master that self-reward process. If you do that, there's essentially nothing that you can't accomplish because you figure it out. But sometimes the arc of a project for me is 10 years. I've been working on a book for 4 years.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you that too, if you were ever gonna write a book, 'cause I feel like
It's
that would
done.
fly off the shelf.
It's
Okay.
done. It's done. And I'll tell you what, Jordan, I'm in the read through phase, and in like 2 weeks, I'll send you a copy for just early look-sees.
Oh, I
For
love that.
I'd love to get a cohort from somebody of your generation to give me the feedback, and I'm looking for criticism. So anyway,
Hmm. Love that. Awesome. So it sounds like it's something that's just small as acknowledging, hey, I'm putting the work in right now, and kind of just connecting that right to the actual effort. It doesn't have to be something big or traumatic. It's just, hey, I sat down and I'm doing the work. I'm typing my book right now, right?
yeah, you know,
Awesome.
it's there's a real like basic and deep wired thing about forward movement, whether or not it's physical movement or cognitive movement or pen to paper. You know, I'm blessed enough to have a couple close friends that happen to have been in the SEAL teams, and they do this better than anybody, but other people do it well. The parents do this really well. You know, when you just have to chunk the day into these little things, like just get the kid fed, like just
Yeah.
fed. And then when you
Yeah.
but the key is, if you just chunk, it becomes degradative. It's like, okay, you're just trying to, anytime your day is only about arriving at happy hour or arriving at like the thing in the afternoon, like I love to work out. So my reward to myself is working out. I used to get up early and work out. Sometimes I do, but my reward to myself is working out. So, but I've noticed that if I make that the reward, the work is a lot less pleasurable. So what I try and do is make the whole thing really pleasurable. And you know, it's interesting because people kick around the word gratitude a lot, but gratitude just kind of emerges from all that as a meta theme. You just feel lucky. Like I feel so blessed that I'm, like I said, breathing, ambulatory. I've been
Yeah.
40, I'm 45, but you know, we've all known people that have, you know, gone early. And it's just one of these things where when you get really into process, you start developing this, like it's almost like a high, like this is amazing. I can't believe this opportunity just, and when you're back on your I always figure you can be back on your heels, flat footed, or forward momentum. And if you find yourself back on your heels, as we all do, you need to do something to get your momentum literally forward. And then when you're there, everyone wants this. The high performance world is all about this, like just gas pedal. And that's why guys like Goggins and guys, anytime we hear or see that, we feel inspired. But it's important, and David, I think, I can't speak for him, but I think he'd be the first person to say this. It's very important to learn how to self-generate that from the inside. Like I'm a big fan of supplements and nutrition and tools and music and all this motivators, but sometimes, every once in a while, it's great to just force yourself into a really a mode of just like, what can I do without any of those helps, like with any of those aids around to support me, because then those things work that much more. So I'm not,
Right.
you know, you don't want to damage yourself. You don't want to run across glass in bare feet just to prove you could. But sometimes it's good to throw on the old pair of kicks and then go run in those. You know,
Yeah. It's
like
funny you say that, because I got really into Goggins too, and then I tried some of that stuff. I tried those intense running things, and I pushed myself to injury, and it was like, oh, okay, that's too much. But
well,
it's
he
crazy.
remarkable. He also has a lot of support. I have a friend, Casey Cordial, who's his trainer. He did 4x4x48 side by side with David, and I'm friends with his brother Rory Cordial. They're trainers, right? They know how to deal with injury and this kind of thing. But
Yeah.
the physical space, it's always straightforward. It's like add 2.5 pounds to the bar each week. It's go for an extra 10 paces on your run. It's get up that much earlier. But in the cognitive realm, like in the world that I live in, it's about, reading and writing and thinking. And that's where we need to learn how to translate the language of forward movement into the mental space. So when you're in bed in the morning and you're kind of spinning back on your heels, look, I'm all for people feeling their feelings and recognizing them. But then there is a time when that becomes its own kind of downward spiral. And we all have to catch ourselves and say, you know what, I'm going to, like, I just organized my book stack this morning. I'm turning over my book list. And it felt meaningless, but you're at least in action, And so,
Mm-hmm.
but learning how to really get into motion mentally and stay in that tunnel for a little while is hard, and it's powerful. And a book, I'm a huge Cal Newport fan, the guy that wrote Deep Work. And I think he's got a book called The World Without Email. I social hypocrite if I
Sorry.
social media. No, that's okay. So I think everyone's got to find their own process. And I make a 90-minute period per day wholly. Like nothing, a nuclear bomb could go off, and I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing during that time. And it's a nightmare. There's times when I'm dying to get water, use the bathroom, answer the phone, but no one is going to interrupt that 90-minute period. And I'll tell you, at the end of that 90-minute period, it feels so good. It makes everything else seem easier. But no one's going to connect with me during that time whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, and you said something earlier too that I learned this from Mel Robbins when I got really big into her and just the whole personal development journey. She said something about, and I don't know, anyways, the snooze button in the morning, right? You said you wake up early and some days you feel great, some days you don't. I took some piece from her book, The 5-Second Rule, and I still believe that it's true and hold on to it. That says when you hit snooze and you kind of go back to bed and it keeps going off and off and off. Let's say you hit snooze and you drift off for 15 minutes, it goes off again, and then you get up. She says you're dropping into another stage of sleep that can last 1 to 3 hours. And so for the first 3 hours of the day, you could be in a sleep state. Your brain could be in a sleep state. Is that true? Is that why people just pound coffee?
Yeah, it's interesting. The snooze button has been demonized. And look, I am everything is better when you're getting really good sleep, and you got to figure that out. The whole first podcast was, a lot of people were like, hey, just give me the short list. Like, look, if there was a one PDF that could allow everyone to conquer sleep perfectly, like it would be done already,
Yeah.
But there are things that can help. But I believe in going back to sleep if you're really tired. The best thing to do is to go to sleep when you're tired and to wake up at the same time each day. And what's tough is when, for young people, so much of social life happens later at night. One of the great things about getting older, I'm 45 years old, is like nobody's like up. My friends have kids. Nobody's doing anything past 10. So,
Yeah.
But the thing is, I don't think you have to get up at 5 a.m. every morning. Get up when you're ready to go. And the first hour of the day is I'm usually a little groggy. And I think that, some days I get less sleep than I need, and I can do fine on 6. And then some days I get 8 and I feel even better. And then some days I'll get more than that and I won't feel good. So I talked about this a little bit, but you don't want to wake up in the middle of one of these 90-minute ultradian cycles. You'll be pretty groggy. There are things that can help sleep, like the morning light, avoiding light late at night. Some magnesium glycinate for some people is a great sleep aid, magnesium threonate. There's stuff out there. I talk about this on the podcast. I always say behaviors first, then lean to supplementation stuff. And then for people who are like on these keto type diets or only meat, sleep is tough to achieve because your serotonin levels are so low, but alertness is easier to achieve. So that's why I follow and have followed for a long time. I'm either fasting during the day and then kind of keto-ish during the day. And then at night, I eat rice, I eat starches, I eat good starches, vegetables, but then I knock out like a baby. I'm just,
Yeah.
and I fall asleep.
Yeah.
I've been accused of this for like 10, 15 seconds. My head goes down, I'm out.
Yep.
But I drink coffee sometimes in the afternoon. I drink mate. Like I have a pretty good relationship to falling asleep. Staying asleep's a little tough. But here's what I would recommend. That that snooze button is a cue. You might try once a week, just seeing when you would wake up naturally. I mean, you're young, so you're still secreting growth hormone. You're still growing. So you want to maximize that. And if you're training hard, there's a good rule of thumb that a lot of people don't know, is that if you are sleeping a lot, but you're still feeling tired, chances are your training volume is a little too high.
Okay, because that's what I was going to ask you too. Is like the Whoop strap, right? And I don't know how familiar you are with that, but it's the strain recovery and sleep part of it, and I've been really focused on the recovery aspect of it. But I'll feel like I'll try to get to bed earlier, right? 7 hours of sleep or something like that. Usually it's been like 5.5, 6. But so now I'm thinking I'm getting enough sleep, so I'm waking up expecting that recovery to be higher, and sometimes it's not. And I'm like, well, what the hell's going on? What is it? Eating too late or screen time?
Okay. I think I might be missing you. I'm a big fan.
No, I have a sorry.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Whoop, and they're not paying me to say that. I think they're great. I know folks there. There are other devices too, of course, but here's the thing. You got to trust your subjective experience. I think it's great that people are using ways to monitor their sleep and recovery, but you also the strongest sense you're ever going to have is your intuitive sense, right? About whether or not you're feeling rested. And you never want an objective tool for sleep to take away from your subjective experience. So if you feel like you're getting enough rest and it's saying you haven't recovered, then it's probably not tapping into all the metrics that are relevant for you. And look, it's a great tool. It measures heart rate variability and a number of other things, but none of these tools are perfected yet, right? And I'm involved, I do some work with Logitech, and they're developing some really cool non-contact sensors. But the whole business of states of mind and body is something that's really emerging. I believe in developing an intuition about the self. I mean, I can literally tell when certain foods or certain things are making me feel good or not. I've worked the supplement space so thoroughly now for so many years that I feel like when I take something, I can tell right away if I don't like it, or I do like it, or if it's kind of nothing. So you have to develop that intuitive sense. And these devices are great. Whoops are terrific, but never, ever allow that to get in the way of your feeling like, because there are going to be days where you're good to go and it's going to say you're not recovered. And
Right. I'm like, what's going on here? I thought I was good.
at the extremes, I think it can pick up at the extremes really well. It's when, as you get closer to the mean, the data gets a little bit fuzzier because, as we say, signal to noise is less clear there.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense then. And I wanted to get into this real quick too, because I know you mentioned earlier, and I know you just said you don't want to be the breathwork guy, but I have to ask, because there's I love following Joe Dispenza too. I love his stuff and his work, and there's a meditation that I've done of his on YouTube, and it's like 17, 18, 19 minutes, and what all it is he says it's just a picture that through your spine, like a tube going up, and just suck through your spine, hold it, squeeze, and exhale, and you do that for like 12 minutes, and I have no idea what the hell is going on while I'm doing it, but I know I feel amazing after. And is that like the whole sucking air through, essentially picturing like a straw, he says, through your spine? Is that a real thing?
Well, I mean, the breathwork practice, and I confess, I'm not really familiar with his work. Like, people ask me time about various people, and I confess, like, so much of my time is spent with the work of like laboratories. I haven't had much time to venture into the more folks. My sister, however, who's a therapist, is like she's a huge Joe Dispenza fan. She loves his stuff, and I think she does the meditation, and there's like a squeezing thing.
Yeah.
So okay, I mean, the reality is you cannot breathe through your spine. Your spine is neural tissue. It's got a central canal that's filled with fluid. I think however, there's some aspects of yoga nidra meditations that involve breathing in and out while visualizing kind of movement up and down the spine. The rhythmic breathing centers in the brainstem, of which there are two, connect to a huge range of areas of brain and body. So, and I doubt he's saying, I don't know, but I doubt he's saying it from the standpoint of like an anatomical thing of sucking air through. I think combining visualization with breathing, and when you do that, you bring in the somatic experience of breathing in a way that's different than just using your mouth and lungs. a lot of somatic therapies and meditations. Like if you meditate, it's not just about thinking about the space right behind your forehead. It's also about concentrating on your breath. You know, here's one thing that we know is true. When you shift your pattern of breathing, just shifting it to a deliberate pattern and not breathing reflexively, that's going to have some positive effect because you're developing what's called interoception and inner awareness, right? Just by doing that. And it's different than like if you said, let's pay attention to your heartbeat, because that's actually hard to do, like without, like some people can do it really easily, but I can't pay attention to my digestion. I can't feel the pulsations of my intestine, right? Maybe if I practiced it a lot. Whereas with breathing, it's really mechanical. You can just drop right into it, you know, and you have control over it, or you can let it run reflexively the moment you let go. No other body processes like that, right? I suppose our limb movements are. But so I think it's cool. I mean, if you found a breathwork practice that works for you, great. And if it shifts your state, fantastic. And I mean, my lab studies breathwork, and we're trying to find the breathwork practices that have the greatest benefits on things like heart rate variability, sleep scores, and some of the deeper metrics of biology that are important for people's cellular health and longevity and all that. And it's just, it needs to be explored systematically. Meanwhile, and I should be clear, because I recently on a podcast, I took a little, I made a comment about mindfulness, and that, and I guess some of the mindful community got a little bit upset, which is, I think mindfulness is great. It's just hard to measure, and people often question whether or not they're doing it right. Whereas the reason like breathing tools and vision tools is that they're so mechanical. You could teach a 4-year-old and walk away, and you know if they're doing it or not. They know if they're doing it or not. So the subjective stuff is tricky, and so I'm not trying to remove its power. It's just harder to address, and certainly in a laboratory, it's hard to study.
Yeah, that makes sense then. And kind of just going off that too, and this is the reason why I got into the whole neuroscience stuff. I mean, not into it, but drew my interest because I've always been into the personal development stuff. And what interests me was why, like, I don't even know if this is a question or not, but we'll see where this goes. But I've always been interested when you take, like, you know, two people, same environment, same opportunities given, you know, person A, person B, and person A seems to achieve or whatever, just go towards their goals more than person B does. When the environment's the same, the opportunities are same. It just seems like that drive is there. And I ask this because I have people ask me who, you know, how do I get more driven? How do I get, you know, hungrier or whatever it is? Is that even a thing? Like, I guess my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, we're interrupting each other. But
I know. Well, I'm just curious because it's like you take those two people, you know, those examples of two people, person A, person B. How does person A get all the way up here and person B doesn't, when everything, not everything, but, you know, the environment and the opportunities are the same? Like, where is that drive coming from? What is it?
Yeah. Okay. So before I answer that, do you mind if I just quickly answer two things that I saw go by in the comments? Because they.
Oh, yeah.
One is that someone asked how many 90-minute learning cycles per day. I do at least one and often two. And I had a podcast on learning and focus where I talk about 2 of those a day is great, but one, it's my workout. I work out once a day or run or whatever. I do cardio stuff. I like that. And I like lifting objects and stuff. But, and I have I put myself through some mental pain and struggle once a day for 90 minutes, sometimes twice. And then someone asked about like Wim Hof, and we can talk about Wim Hof breathing and things like that too. But to answer your question, so 2 people essentially equal ability, opportunity, etc. You know, it's interesting. If I had to, you know, wager an answer off the top of my head, I'd say the person that can get into more forward motion for more of whatever period of their day more often is going to be the person who's we're going to call motivated. I think their internal worlds might look a lot the same, but when you start getting into forward motion, it has that feedback loop of giving something to occupy your thinking, whether or not it's the breathing practice that you described that you enjoy, this breathing up the spine, or whether or not it's a different one, or whether or not it's exercise or it's writing. When we are focusing our concentration, or when we focus our mind on something and we're in action, there's a million other things that we're not thinking about, and it catalyzes more forward movement. In fact, there was a study that was done looking at, I think I've talked about it, it's like called the tube test. You put 2 rodents in a test and they push each other back and forth, and one pushes one out. That's the loser. And they're very territorial. experiments been done over and over again. The winner has a much higher probability of winning on a subsequent interaction with another animal, and the loser starts to lose more readily. Now, here's what's interesting. People always jump to all the societal stuff, right? But testosterone levels the same, age the same. It's all matched as well as you possibly could. Even if you push one from behind and it wins, it becomes a winner. Now, and so that tells you something. And so they've now mapped out what are the brain areas that underlie this. And it's an area of the brain that translates this feeling of agitation, of anxiety and agitation, into forward movement of any kind. And what's so cool is that you can take an animal, and now there's work similar to this being done in my lab and other labs, put them in an environment, and even if it's competition totally different than the tube test, it's like competition for the warm spot or competition or just work. What you find is that the more you can generate more forward movement per unit time equals success. And I think there's this term neurotic that I use, in a non-clinical sense. The neurotic mode is to get in a loop where you're not moving forward. And I think you take two people to answer your question directly. The one who succeeds is the person who can defeat their own internal neuroses. And the neurotic thing is to just keep going in a loop, right? And just fail. Now, everyone feels the impulse to do that. But when one of those people kind of breaks out of that neurotic loop and takes one step in the right direction that catalyzes a second step, then I think what happens is you're looking at the person who's going to succeed. This is why I do think, and look, if people haven't played sports when they were younger or they've had serious lack of opportunity, I think I want to be respectful of the fact that everyone comes to the table with different backgrounds. But if you've had an experience that you can draw on mentally where you were back on your heels and you managed to get flat-footed, and then you went flat-footed into action, you got through it, not just by passively waiting, but by taking action, then you can look to that as an example. That kind of crucible event early can help.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was being an undergraduate and coming from behind, having very little education in high school given my background. And I had opportunities, but I squandered a lot of those, and life circumstances led me down a different path. And then college, I think of, even now, I still pull like 4 or 5 all-nighters per year, at least, maybe 10 with grants and things. And I know I need sleep, but I frankly, like, every once in a while in the middle of those, I'm like, this is so painful. You're not going to die. You're not going to die. And then when you get the grant or you get the pay, you feel great. And even if you don't, I do believe in pushing oneself on a regular basis, but at a chemical level, to answer your question, Jordan, that the drive is dopamine. As much as I hate to reduce it to a single molecule, dopamine is the molecule of wanting, of motivation and desire. And when in the Eastern practices, when they talk about chi, of life force, it's dopamine. We can't overlook the obvious, which is that when people are in a low dopamine state, they are amotivated. They don't experience rewards from the little things they do. When people are in a hyper dopaminergic state, which I don't recommend, like when people take cocaine or things like that, they get reward from every little thing, and they have their own form of going in a loop. But when dopamine is in its right levels and you work hard and you're like, yes, I did it. I got that. Even if it's a little thing, the dopamine circuits are teed up and they're working well. And dopamine is motivation. It is the desire to make progress. It equates to success. And anyone that's different is in denial of biology. And so should we all be taking dopamine? No, we should be learning how to tap into those circuitries for ourselves and to not let them go too high. Nobody wants to be around the person who's like high on their own life and all their things too long. It's terrible. It's like there's a name for that. It's called delusions of grandeur. And those people inevitably, they're not charismatic. They're kind of annoying. So the key is that quiet-ish, quiet dopamine thing. I sense you have this. I'm not just saying that. Like, people who are builders, like, they know how to ratchet into that, and they're not looking for validation externally, because the thing about dopamine is dopamine can only be released internally, and if you attach it to external rewards too much, you won't be able to tap into it anymore. I had just brief anecdote. A good friend of mine, he and I were talking to someone who had made a lot of money, had done really well, like one of these big IPO cash outs that were just like, whoa. And
Yeah.
he called us, the two of us. He was like, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure what to do now. I'm kind of stressed. And it's the problem everyone wishes they had, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because, and I said, be really careful how much you internalize this win, because you will stop trying. And I have a lot of friends, a few in Silicon Valley and a few elsewhere, who've done very well, who are truly unhappy people because they got the big win, and then they can't ever get that back. They can't get that high back, and they're amotivated, they're depressed. And I can't say I wouldn't want their finances, because I would love to fund more research, is really what I would do with the money, frankly. But so the key, so what's the answer? Get very attached to the process of effort, and don't get too attached to those rewards. Be very careful. And if you doubt whether or not you're doing that properly, just remember that if you have a capacity to work, you have the best life you could ever have. Like humans were made to work. That's
Right.
why we're here. Like,
Yeah.
here to work and help each other so the next generation can move forward. I really believe that. That's not a bunch of like vapors for me. It's all about these dopamine circuits.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that'll help me tremendously. I think a lot of people as well too. I had what do we got? I just had a couple more questions if you're okay with that, and I had
I'm
one
good,
that was.
I'm good until the hour but it's up to you. I tend to riff long. I've never been known for being succinct.
I
So
love it. I'll just ask you a few more here, and I will let you go because I appreciate your time. And this one doesn't really have anything to do with personal development, but I wanted to ask it, and I think my cousin is watching this, and I don't know. Are you familiar with encephalitis?
I mean, I know of it. I'm not like,
Yeah. Okay. I was just gonna ask you on it because he had it when he was younger, and he kind of described it to me as like just blacking out, just doesn't remember those eight months of his life, and then one day it's like his brain shut off and then just turned right back on. And if that's fine, but I was just curious, like, what the hell is that? Like,
well,
he literally like shut down.
yeah, I mean, so that's a and I'm not dodging. I think that's a conversation you should you have my phone number, so we should just, what would be best would probably be get on a call with a neurologist, and
Sure.
could answer that, because I can speculate, but I wouldn't want to speculate about something as serious as that. So we can just, the one thing about my friendship circle is I got a lot of friends who are MDs, scientists, and I have a lot of friends in other communities too. But let's get a neurologist to answer your question. Yeah.
That's fair. Yep, that's fair. Cool. And then I guess I got one last one here, and then I can let you go. It's kind of just because people, again, in the entrepreneurial community, talk a lot about changing. If you want to change, create a better life or whatever, is changing your environment or kind of your surroundings. A lot of people talk about people around you as well. How big of a factor is that? And like, I guess, what does that do mentally or internally when you can change your surroundings completely or change everything around you completely?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking this. Sorry, my bulldog's drinking over there, and it sounds like a gorilla.
No worries.
He's so loud, it's insane.
Costello, right?
Yeah, he might come pay a visit if we're he
Right on.
moves very slow. He's old. He's a giant dog. I don't know if people realize just how big he is. Like, his head's like twice as big as mine. He's 90-pound bulldog mastiff. I mean,
Jesus.
he's super slow. So I remember reading that a few years ago. I was actually at a time in my life when my lab was doing really well, but I'll just be honest, I was not particularly happy where I was at. I was living in a place where I didn't have close friends. I've always had a lot of, I grew up in a big pack of guys mainly, and I've always had like a big crew, and I was professionally working really hard, but I was feeling very isolated. And I remember hearing that, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I was thinking, wow, like, that's tough. And I worked hard to try and find connection. And in the last, I would say 3 to 5 years, I've reconnected with older friends, and I've built out friendships that are just amazing. Like, I have the most incredible friends. They're amazing human beings. They are very high integrity. They would, as one person described it, most all of them would die of hypothermia just to keep you warm without like realizing they were doing it. They would just do it. Those kind of friends. And those kind of friends are exceedingly rare in this world, right? And but that took a lot of work. It took a lot of vetting. It was work to find friends that I resonate with. I form friendships mainly, frankly, through training with people. I like to run or swim or lift with people. And then we become friends. We talk about other things. And that's just how I relate. I think it's growing up in the skateboard community and other communities, martial arts communities, where that's just kind of what you did. And, but it was a long haul. And what I'll say is, I think if you don't have access to the kinds of people that make you feel like motivated, or you feel like, I'm not anti or pro anything. I'm pretty much, I think personal freedom is what it's all about. But like for me, I was never a big drinker. Like I'd have one or two, but I was never a big drinker. So if spending time with people required drinking, then I was feeling it, and it was in the way of my other goals. So you find your people, and I think you have to go through that process of work. And part of it though is, oftentimes I get asked, like, how to find and form friendships. It's kind of an interesting question. I get that a lot. Last podcast I talked about the importance of social connection and warding against long-term stress. A lot of that is being flexible. It doesn't mean saying, oh yeah, I'll hang out till 3 a.m. partying if that's not your thing, but it means being flexible. You have to be willing to get in a van and go on a trip with people and find out that, one of them is somebody you resonate with and the other 4 not so much. It means not doing everything on your schedule. You can't be a control freak and expect to make friends, Right. And, there's a great saying here. I guess I'm quoting a lot of my close friends here, but I have a really great friend, Pat Dossett, who runs Made For, who's a company I eyes for. I'm not, but he's really impressive human being. He says, he did, and he was in the SEAL teams for 9 years. And he always says, act, don't ask. There's kind of something cool about a friend that shows up and like hands you a coffee. They're not like, hey, you want me to pick you up a coffee? Just like those little things of like act, don't ask. It's not manipulation. It's just, and pretty soon what you find is the people that are coming to your life are people who are interested in hearing about your ideas because you're interested in hearing about their ideas, right? Like, I do believe we get the friends we deserve. I really do. Because it's sort of like how you show up to friendship, how you show up to business, how you show up to science. I have amazing collaborators in science. I adore them. I'm in awe of people like David Spiegel and their work, and enjoy working with them. But I think the reason I have these great collaborators, I like to think, is because I show up to a collaboration trying to think of what I can do for the collaboration, not what it can do for me. And so I think a lot of people get it backwards. They get very transactional about relationships of all kinds. And it involves some disappointment and some failure, and just realizing that people are people, and it's good to, provided you don't end up, dead or in jail or injured too badly, it's good to explore, different genres and different things that interest you. And so you can't be rigid and expect to have friends. And I will say this, if you can start collecting a community of people that are like really getting after it, and the language here that I'm using sounds a lot like kind of like sports language or something, but this is also true for, like, I've got a friend up in Oregon, and she has the biggest like patterns channel on Etsy, like for knitting. She's like
sure.
And like, she's amazing. Like, she just knits the most incredible stuff. And, she's got this collection of people in her group, her knitting group.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. Like, it's amazing. So you have to ante in. Right? You have to ante in, and you have to be willing to take risk. And the last thing I'll say about this is, I know these days there's a lot of emphasis on vulnerability and authenticity. I personally feel like that is something that comes later. Like, there's this fine line between authenticity and oversharing, right? And there's a way to show up authentically. I always say you can be accurate but not exhaustive, meaning you can be truthful but not tell anything, right?
Yeah.
Show up yourself, but you don't have to like spill all your stuff out on the And I think, it's a process. You learn like boundary thing, and what you'll find is that over time, if you pay attention to what the people closest to you are doing, what matters to them, and you put some effort into supporting them, like, it just catalyzes a good life. And you can't do it expecting anything in return, and you are certain to be disappointed from time to time with people. But I think that in general, you make great friends and you form great business relationships by anteing in and being, you know, and
Yep.
that's what's worked for me anyway. But it
Yep.
took me a very long time. I have old friends that are amazing that are still in my life. I've got new friends that are amazing that fortunately I have in my life, but it takes time. And I have a million stories about disappointments, people not following through. I had someone steal money, this and that. I decided to not, like, yeah, I'm a human being. Stuff happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we let them
That's
live.
funny.
We let
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I appreciate it, and then I guess I was curious too, and we can end it here in a minute. But your lab out there in California, can people come, like, just come in there, schedule something, or how does that work?
Yeah, so before the whole 2020 madness,
That thing, yeah.
subjects would come to our lab. They'd sign up. They'd come to the lab. And we were running in-lab experiments, and we've just published that paper recently. We have every intention of continuing those types of experiments, but right now, students aren't even allowed on campus, right?
Oh, sure.
So everything is kind of clamped down until this whole thing gets sorted out one way or the other. We are running studies, however, remotely, and I think we're going to continue to do this. And I know we are, where we recruit people for experiments. They actually, a lot of them are wearing Whoops, and we're monitoring sleep and other things like that. So thank you, Whoop. I think
Yeah.
I spotted some Whoop folks on here in the chat. They dropped in. So we're very grateful to Whoop for their support of those experiments. And I think those we're going to announce soon. As long as people have logged on here, I might as well just say, you know, there are these studies on hypnosis, studies on breath work that Speed Lab and my lab are doing. To announce them on here. And I point to the resources for those. Reverie Health has these research-backed hypnosis protocols that are really great for improving sleep, anxiety, dealing with anxiety, those kinds of things. And you know, those studies, we're going to announce more of them soon. So that's my drawn out answer to your very succinct question, Jordan.
Gotcha. I love it. Awesome. Well, I'll let you go. And I guess everyone watching too, it looks like everyone is very well aware of your work, but I'm going to shout out to your podcast because I love it. And I watch that on Spotify. You've been on several other interviewers, podcasts as well on YouTube. And then you got the book coming out in a year or so or something like that. Am I right with that timeline?
It's with the publisher. I still have some work to do. It's with the publisher, but yeah, sometime before then. And yeah, certainly the podcast I'll get back to teaching on Instagram more regularly. The podcast is occupying a good amount of my time these days, but I post things here. I have lives from time to time. So
yeah, well, and that's why I like it, because you make it easy for people like myself to understand like all this complex stuff, and it's very layman's terms. So I think that's why so many people are drawn towards it, because it's like, oh, that makes sense the way you kind of describe things. So I think that's why it's blowing up. I think that's why the podcast is blowing up. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, and I'll take a moment to just say, you know, I've been very impressed by you. Your patience is unbelievable, because I keep kicking this down the road, not because I didn't want to do it, but for other reasons. But it's awesome. You know, a couple things. One, if you're out in California, come train.
Absolutely.
Two, I appreciate you having me on and the opportunity. And three, and most important, it's clear you're a builder, and you know, like people just stepping up and building community is amazing, and that's what it's all about. And not everyone's going to do that, and I think that's great. Some people want to be part of a community, but they don't want to, you know, be leading a community. And I think it's great that you're doing it. I know you're doing it from a place of really high integrity, and very impressed. I have a good gut sense for these things, and I'm certain you're going to go far. So you already.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thanks again. You have a good rest of your Sunday. Okay.
I'm trained, but go easy. I'm old, so.
I would love it. Like I said earlier, I was so into Goggins, and so I watched too much of his stuff, and then I got injured. But I love that pushing the limit kind of stuff, so I'm always open for it. That'd be awesome.
As long as it doesn't kill you, you gotta know where that edge is to know how close you are to it. And you know, I don't promote injury, but you know, now you know where that red line is, and there's
true.
The other thing, just one thing about that, because I had an incident recently while swimming, not my own, is when you know where that red line is for you, you can also spot it in other people too. And it puts you in a position to help them out. You can tell when people are not we talked about back in your heels, flat foot forward, when they're like this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Too
So
much, too much. That's awesome. Good
yeah.
deal. Well, thanks again. You have a good rest of your Sunday, and I'll be in touch with you. I really appreciate it.
All right. I enjoyed this, and I look forward to another sometime soon.
You too. Take care.
Cheers.
Gotta figure out how to end these things. There we go.
Man.